I want to read you something God said about worship music. I despise your religious festivals. Your assemblies are a stench to me. Even though you bring me burnt offerings and grain offerings, I will not accept them. Away with the noise of your songs. I will not listen to the music of your harps. That is Amos chapter 5. Now here's the part I cannot get past. He's not saying that to a people who had walked away. He's saying it to a people who were still showing up, still singing, still bringing the offerings, doing everything they had been told to do. And as far as we can tell, not one of them knew. There's no verse where the music stops and somebody in the congregation says, "Hey, wait, is he even taking this?" I have led worship for most of my adult life. And what that passage means is that it is possible to do all of it right and to feel nothing wrong at all and still have God not want any of it. So, how would you know? If yours was not wanted, how would you ever know? I'm Kevin.
I'm Kavita.
And this is His Faithfulness, Episode 9. Now, before we get into this week's episode, I want to give you a quick sneak peek into next week's episode. Next Thursday, I'm going to argue that faith does not pass down to your children automatically. And Kavita is going to make me say what that means for our 4 boys.
Yes.
So tune in next week. We've got a fun episode lined up. Now, into this week's episode. And things are going to get pretty heated up this week, right? We're going to move away from our usual format of telling you a story about ourselves, and we're going to explore a wider topic from our context or through our lens. And the topic today is worship, right? Or how do I know if God accepts my worship? Now we go back to that verse from Amos 5. And this is God telling the people of Israel that their worship was not accepted. It was rejected. And there's some pretty harsh language behind it, right? Now, what's important to remember at this point in time is that Israel was actually not in rebellion against God here, right? There's no golden calf in this chapter. They had not stopped worshipping. They weren't worshipping other gods, right? This was the whole problem. The festivals were running, the offerings were being brought, music was playing. If we walked into that nation on a Sabbath, we would have said these are a very devout people. Everything looked right and everything was being done right. Yet God says that their assemblies are a stench. They are not adequate. It's just instant rejection. They are repelled. Now, most of us have a category for God rejecting sin. We understand sin and we know God rejects it and we're comfortable with that idea. But we do not have one for when God rejects worship, because worship is supposed to be the thing that you do right. It's the safe thing. What do you do when the thing that you're supposed to be doing is rejected? It's very similar to the story of Cain and Abel. Cain and Abel both worship God in their way, but yet Cain was rejected. Did Cain know he was being rejected? Not until God told him.
I guess one sinned and another one didn't, right? So, was it because of
But
that?
why? Where was the sin in that, right?
Well,
Why?
one was the bad one was the good one. So
Later, right? one became a murderer. But at that point, Cain thought he was worshipping. Right? He didn't know that his worship was not accepted. There is no recorded moment of anyone noticing that the worship was rejected. He did not know that his worship was rejected. Even like us, we go to church every Sunday,
Yeah,
we worship God.
of course.
It feels fine.
But how would you know that if it's accepted or not?
That's what we're going to try to get into today, right?
Interesting topic. I like this one.
Okay. Whatever God was measuring, it was not producing a feeling in the room, meaning everyone thought they were doing the right thing and everything's
When you
okay.
say measuring, that's an interesting thing. How does God measure?
That's exactly what we're going to try to figure out.
Based on what?
I don't have all
Your
the answers.
personality, your faith, how. Yeah. So there must be a way that God measures everything that you do, right?
So this is what enters your head when you hear this,
Of
right?
course, yes.
Like what God telling through Amos, the people of Israel, your worship is that. Yeah, I get it. You're asking this question.
I'm one of them right now. I'm doing everything that I should.
That's a perfectly valid question. And here's the scary thing. It's a question I have as well.
Man,
I'm an assistant pastor, I'm a worship leader, and I have the same questions when I read this verse, right? How do I know? How is it measured? What is he measuring?
yes.
Right? So Amos actually answers his own question 2 verses later. And he says, "But let justice roll on like a river, righteousness like a never failing stream." Right? Justice and righteousness. He points to these 2 things. First glance, what do these 2 things have to do with worship? He answers a question about music with an answer about how they were living. 2 very separate things for us, right? One is worship. I go to church, I sing my songs, the band plays, the instruments are all in harmony, and he's coming here and saying justice and righteousness and things like that.
Not relatable, but maybe the way of living.
You got it, right? That's not a change of subject. In God's mind, it was never 2 subjects. And here's why I say that, right? The Hebrew word avodah, right, is 1 word and it has 145 occurrences in the Bible, right? And here's the interesting thing about the word. It's translated both as work, i.e. like ordinary labor, including the slavery in Egypt uses that word avodah. It is also used as the word for worship, the service that you perform in the temple.
So it's the same word that's being used.
It's the same word
both.
that's being used. Hebrew does not split these into 2 categories. We do. So when an Israelite heard the word for worship, they did not hear a word for music or a word for song or a word for singing or anything like that, right? They heard a word that meant work, living. They heard service rendered. What you spend your hours and your body on. That was the word for worship. Now there's another word in Hebrew, right? Shaka. The most common Hebrew word actually translated to worship, right? It literally means to bow down, to lower yourself physically in front of someone. It is a body word. It is what you do with your spine. It is actually something that translates to a physical act, right? Now, nowhere in either word is a melody required. You don't need a melody to work. You don't need a melody to bow down. Which means the thing that they could not feel going wrong was never happening in the room when they worship. The thing that they could not feel going wrong was happening on a Monday. It was what was happening in their lives. That's why Amos talks about justice and righteousness. He's saying your worship isn't what you do when you come into the temple and you sing some songs and read some psalms. Your worship is what is going on when you're living your life on a Monday, when you're working. That is your worship.
It's a way of living from Monday to Saturday, and Sunday you think you're serving, but you're still working. So it's like it still continues.
Correct. Correct. And here's the scary thing for me, right? That's not the definition of worship that I grew up with, right? Most churches you walk into, every church I've walked into, worship is an item on the order of service. 30 minutes on worship, right? Like as though that covers worship like that, like as though that's the only time in a service that you're worshiping.
That's the agenda, yeah.
Right? You always see worship at the beginning and everyone thinks that's the worship. But I'm curious about your point of view, right? Because you didn't grow up with the church vocabulary. You went into a church week after week, not even knowing what is worship or anything like that, just looking, right? What did you think worship was when you first became familiar with the concept?
I didn't even know what was worship, to be honest. When I first went into a church, it was a big church, right? So this is the first time walking into the church, right? And yes, they sing, there were hymns and all those things, right? So the worship and all that. There's always an order of service that will go on, right? And then you follow accordingly and all that. So I always thought that, okay, you have to follow this and you have to sing and then this goes after that, you know? So it becomes like a routine kind of a thing as well. So to me, coming from a non-Christian background and first time going to church, trying to understand, easy to learn because it's like a textbook. Every week is the same unless if something changes, someone adds something or whatever, and then it will be notified as well. And then you just follow accordingly. That's it. You just follow.
But do you think that portion of time that says worship, praise and worship, do you think that's the only time you're worshiping in church?
But when I didn't know much, when I didn't have guidelines to follow, I didn't have like more exposure and all that, much exposure into the Christian world and how it goes and all that. Of course, to me, it's like a very like, you know, like a default thing. Yeah, you just praise and worship, you sing that song and that's it, and the song's done. Again, it's like a routine thing.
It's like the structure of it.
So every week you just follow that. That's it. You cannot get lost. There's no chance for you to get even lost because it's just a structure that you follow every week. But later on it changes, right? Mindset-wise, it changed me because when you're doing a worship, right, it depends. It can be 30 minutes, it can be part of the agenda, but how you praise and you worship, right, it continues. For me, it continues in my mind, personally, spiritually, in a church. The church may be silent, the church may be speaking of something else or whatever. Sometimes I get into a moment and in my mind, I will be worshiping differently.
Okay.
If you ask me, my personal opinion is individual. How you perceive things, how you see things, your point of view. In terms of worship, it doesn't stop just in church, right? You sing songs. I worship in the house. I sing songs in the house. I go to work. I think about those songs. You know, it refreshes me. It refreshes my soul and it makes me happy because the lyrics, the music, it's lively, right? It's something that you talk about God. When you talk about God, you sing about God, you're just feeling proud of it. So it doesn't stop just 30 minutes and that's it. No. I live in that moment and it continues and it goes on.
So you're still tying it back to the song aspect of it, right?
To me,
you're still singing songs. That's still the worship part of it.
Yeah, because that's how I connect, right? Songs and music, right?
But when the word worship enters your head, you immediately think song.
Yeah.
Okay.
Correct.
Now, you said something that's very important in that, right? You used the word structure. Okay. Now, did you know that Jesus actually refused to answer the question of what is worship? I'm going to take you to John chapter 4, right? This is when Jesus was at the well with the Samaritan woman. I think we've spoken about this in one of our previous episodes.
Which one is it? Oh, the woman...
The Samaritan woman who comes to the well because she's rejected by everyone.
Had husbands.
Yeah, she has husbands. Right? So the conversation goes on and Jesus reveals these things about her and it becomes uncomfortable, right? What she does when he reveals that information is she immediately changes the subject. Right? She changes the subject and she says, our ancestors worshipped on this mountain and you Jews say Jerusalem. Which is it? Right? She deflects. It's a location question. Which building, which mountain, which tradition is the right thing? It's an ancient version of an argument that Christians are still having today. Which style, which hymns or which modern songs, this church or that one. It is a way of not answering the thing that he has raised. We are so caught up in the structure, in the order of service, in the agenda. It must be this way.
Okay, then let me stop you there. Back then, like what you said, Jesus didn't answer that question, right?
Yeah.
So there weren't any structure. That means
There was a structure. The Hebrews had a structure to their service. The Samaritans did not like it that the Hebrews were telling them this is the way you must do it. Right?
So there was always a disagreement.
There was always a disagreement.
I can tell you honestly, until today, there's always a disagreement also.
Yes, it's true, right?
That's why Jesus didn't answer that question to that lady in the well.
That's why he refused.
Yeah.
Right? That's exactly why he refused. He says this, a time is coming when you will worship the Father neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem.
That's a very clear answer.
He took the 2 points she raised about structure, Jerusalem or this mountain, and he says the time is coming when it's not going to even matter.
Yes.
True worshippers will worship God the Father in spirit and in truth, for they are the kind of worshippers the Father seeks. So you see what Jesus is doing here, right? He's not picking a side.
Correct.
He retires the entire category, right? So he comes up with this objection about, put it in modern terms, right? Hymns or modern songs. Should I stand up, sit down, or should it be a more casual thing?
Does it matter?
That's what Jesus says. I don't even care, right? The argument is not even valid. The Father seeks worshippers who are worshipping in spirit and in truth, and those are the worshippers that he wants.
But I think structure nowadays are meant for a reason as well, because it cannot just go blankly, or you cannot just go walk into the church and if there's no structure or whatever, how would that work, man?
Structure serves a purpose, right?
Yeah.
This is what I believe. I think structure is there for a reason, is to keep things organized and to keep things moving along.
Of course, yes, and of course within the time as well.
Correct.
Yeah.
But I think structure has overtaken intention. And the intention of a service is always to worship God. It's a woman with a very complicated moral history who is drawing water at the hottest hour of the day because she is rejected by her own people. And the definition of that teaching of worship in the New Testament was given to her. Right? The definition of worship was given to someone that the worship department would not even have allowed to come near a mic today.
You'll be surprised, the people that God choose.
That's very nicely summarized. Right? So we now know this, right? We know that Jesus has retired the category completely. We know that worship is not just about singing the song. Worship is about the intention. Now, I want you to be honest with me on the record here, right? You have watched me lead worship for years. You have watched me at home as well. Have you ever seen me do what the woman did? Reach for the religious version of something instead of the real thing. When you see me as a worship leader, do I have a mountain that I say it must be this way, it must be a certain way? Or when I'm leading the church in worship, am I actually doing what Jesus said, which is worship in spirit and in truth?
Honest answer, right? I didn't know this was coming. I wasn't aware or prepped for all these things, right? But honestly, it's the second one, I would say. It's from the heart and soul. It's not structure. It's always from the heart. So it depends, right? Yeah, it can be a structure here and there, whatever. There's a service, a order of service and everything, right? But when you're doing it, it comes from the heart and from the soul.
Do you see me carrying that same attitude into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday?
Oh, that's a hard one.
It's a difficult one for me to ask because you see me at my most transparent,
Yeah.
right? So the answer you give me is probably not going to be an answer that I like. Because I have an indication of what that answer is, and I'm afraid you're going to echo that sentiment.
Of course.
But do you see me carrying that into the other days of the week?
Very, very heartbreaking, but sadly, no. Yeah, no. I see this a lot, not only in yourself, but even myself as well, right? That's what I'm trying to I'm trying to say as well. I'm trying to come forward and say that this is not only with yourself, but with me and I guess many others as well. I always ask you this question, right? I always thought, right, you go to church on Sunday, okay, you feel like you're very holy and you're this and that, you sing songs, worship songs and all that. From an assistant pastor, I'm asking you, right? I'm not asking you as my husband, yeah?
Okay.
Because otherwise we'll be fighting. I feel like sometimes I'm just being a hypocrite to myself. I'm worshiping, I'm singing songs and everything. On Monday, I'm back to Kavita, the one who goes to work and does a job and this and that, right? So, like, you have this personality that is slightly different, or not slightly different, is different from what you see on a Sunday.
It's true, right? It happens to the best of us. And I want to make this very clear. I don't think anyone is exempt from that criticism.
Yeah.
As a worship leader, when you said you enjoy listening to a song on a regular day and you worship and the song comes up, for me, right, when I hear a song that I like, I'm immediately thinking about the arrangement and I'm thinking about how I can get a congregation involved in it, which is very different from when I'm singing that same song on stage, right? There's a worship me and there's a non-worship me, if you can say that, that's thinking outside of that worship box. What I think we have to realize is that the altar has moved. Romans 12 verse 1. Therefore, I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and pleasing to God. This is your true and proper worship. Right? True and proper worship, which Paul uses the word here, he uses the word logikon latrein. Latreia is worship service language. It's a very formal language used for worship in the temple, right? The service owed to God, bound up within the temple system. Paul takes that vocabulary and attaches it to your body. Your ordinary, unimpressive, tired body doing ordinary things on a Tuesday, right? The altar moved. Service is no longer happening in the church or in the temple. Service is now happening in your kitchen, in your car, in how you speak to your children when you are exhausted. He means it is the thing itself now. What do I mean by that? The word living sacrifice, right? It is almost a joke word. It's almost an oxymoron because a sacrifice is always an animal that has died. It is a dead thing. But now Paul is using the two words together, living sacrifice, meaning it stayed on the altar. A living sacrifice, think about it, if you brought a live goat to the altar, the goat would just climb down. And you have to pick it up and you have to put it back on the altar again. Right? It has to be put back on every single day because it keeps getting up and walking off. That's exactly what you just said, right? You come into church and you sing your songs and you act very holy in inverted commas, but then you go into Monday and you're back to being Kavita Kaur.
This
applies to everybody.
Yeah,
Everyone is like that.
Of course.
Here's what Paul is saying, right? Worship means that you are now a living sacrifice, meaning you go into church on a Sunday, you sing your songs, you say your prayers, you listen to the message, and then you go back. And on Monday, you do it all over again. Only this time you're not doing it in a church, you're doing it as you're washing the dishes, you're doing it as you're folding the clothes, you're doing it as you're driving to work. The altar has moved. It is no longer in the church. The altar is now your life, and your life has got to be the living sacrifice. And when you are doing that, then you are worshipping God. And that is not a failure of the system. Here's the beautiful part. That is the design of the system. Worship is not a state that you achieve. You just said it, right? When I go and I'm worship leading, you can see that it's coming from the heart because I've reached this state where I'm in like oneness with the Spirit of God. It's not a state that you achieve. It is a thing that you do again tomorrow and the day after that and the day after that and the day after that, which I think is the closest thing to an answer this episode has, right? You cannot check what God accepted yesterday. You can only put back what you can today. right? And I think that's the one thing that I want you to take away from this, because it's the one thing I'm taking away from this, is that every day of my life is now the act of worship. Not just those moments when I'm singing a song and I'm lifting my hands and I feel like I am in that moment. That moment has to be every day. I want to point that back towards you now, right? There's a house with 4 boys here, right?
5.
5, including the big one, right? Putting that on the altar is a very unglamorous thing. It means there are 6 loads of laundry. It means the school runs. In all those moments, do you think that they actually feel like worship, or does it look like worship afterwards when you write it down? Do you see the worship in that?
It's just a routine, right? I don't see a worship there. To be honest, right, when I carry myself on Sunday, yes, I go into the moment and I feel the presence of God. But once Monday hits, right, it's a routine all over again, right? Sometimes you don't find the time. Where do you slot in the time, the moment that you can actually worship God? You can sing your favorite songs. You can be so proud of this God. You're just in that worship mode. What you've done on Sunday and you're still on Monday, Tuesday, whatever. It's difficult. It's not easy. It is not easy at all. If you ask me, I am not perfect. I have not done it. Even lately, yesterday, day before yesterday, I missed it. I was even thinking this morning, I always play my worship songs, when I wake up in the morning and I go down when I'm making my breakfast and all that. I make sure that the house is just, covered in music and all that, the sound of the worship songs and all that, right? But even I don't have time to do it. So, yeah, you will not have time. You go into that routine and you're a different person. Your mindset will change. The way you think will change. You're no longer thinking like a worship person anymore. Like how you worship, right?
Like how you are in that moment in church.
Exactly, yeah. You're now sometimes angry, sometimes you're happy, sometimes just too many emotions, moods and all that, right? So that's why I said, even me, right? I'm just frankly speaking, right? Suddenly something happens and I'm just angry. Then I ask God, why this, why that? You question God, right? And then you no longer listen to that worship song anymore. Why? Because you're angry.
Yeah.
Yeah, you question God, right? Why God? Why this happened? Just example, like, your day didn't turn out as how you want it to be, as how you plan, right? And then you just get angry. And then the next day, you don't play the worship songs that you always play anymore. You just think that, I'm just so angry, I don't want to think about it anymore, that's it. And suddenly, you're not thinking about this God anymore. He's always been there for you, obviously, and he wants your attention so badly, but you're not thinking about him. Why? Just because one day went wrong, something went wrong, So I go through that as well. I'm not, as I say, I'm not perfect, I stopped listening to the worship songs thinking, why God, when, you ask God. And then you get so frustrated. And then you stop completely.
That's when life stops becoming worship. But that's what Jesus was saying, right? In order for you to be accepted, life must be worship.
Correct.
Right? So that answer to that question at the beginning, does God accept my worship? Jesus answered it in a different place. When you look at the Old Testament, here's God telling the people, the priests, that before you enter and perform your service, you need to cleanse yourself, wash your feet, because you have picked up dirt as you have gone out into the world, right? So come and clean yourself before you come into my presence. Jesus says the same thing but in a different way. And I love these kinds of similarities because it shows that the God of the Old Testament and the God of the New Testament is the same God. When Jesus says, when you come to pray to God, if you have a disagreement with your brother, go and settle that disagreement first before you come and pray to God. In the Lord's Prayer, he says the same thing. Forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who have trespassed against us. Meaning, do not forgive me if I have not forgiven someone else. It's the same concept, right? As you go through life, as you go through the week, you're picking up dirt, right? From all the different things that you're going through. You're picking up frustrations, you're picking up disappointments, you're picking up anger, and you're carrying all of these things back into his presence. And the same instruction applies. Let go of it, release it, make peace with your fellow brother or your fellow man. Because if you don't, your service or your worship is not going to be accepted. The same rule that applied to the priests in the Old Testament. I'm in the same boat as you. I find it very hard when you're vacuuming the floor on a weekday to do that. But I think this is what God is trying to tell us, that He's not asking us to do the easy thing. Because some people will look at that and say, oh, if everything is worship and everything I do is worship, then I don't need to set aside time for God because everything is now worship. The opposite is true, right? The bar is actually higher because you're not just being graded at that moment when you're standing in church and singing a song and how well you're singing the song. You're now being graded across your entire life. Are you living moment to moment in a way that is worshipful to God? And that is when you know whether God is accepting or rejecting. So I want to end with an example from our own house. Jayden, right? We both know Jayden struggles to sing, right? But we've seen this in Jayden, right? He tries. He wants to sing. The music is in him. And he's always reaching to sing, especially when we're all singing worship songs together. He tries, but he's off key. He doesn't get the words. But the song in him wants to come out. By every definition of the world, Jayden is not a good worshipper, right? Or a good singer at the very least, right? But every category that we've spoken about before this collapses in front of Jayden, right? Amos talking about the technically excellent music that the people brought but was rejected, collapses in front of Jayden, right? His is the opposite problem. The life is right, the execution is wrong, right? Service rendered, the word Avodah, right? Service rendered, not the sound produced. That's Jayden, right? Romans 12, an ordinary body offered up as the whole service. By every definition Scripture actually gives, Jayden is not a bad worshipper. Only by the definition of the world. And that's why I always believe, right? When Jayden sings a song of worship, even the angels stop to listen. Because I believe Jayden's worship is the most accurate form of worship in our house. So, I'm going to let you have the last word. To the person listening who has decided that they cannot sing, they do not know the language, they did not grow up with any of it, what do you have to say to them?
Sounds like me, huh?
That's why you get the last word.
Yeah, I'm not a good worshipper. I don't sing well, and I don't know a lot of things yet, right? But you just keep trying. Yeah, you just never give up. That's all. I mean, it's never simple. It's never easy. You still try to understand things, and even the worship songs, you'll try to understand what it means, every single word of it, right? But if you make it a routine, right, trust me, you will understand. You just make it a routine daily, not only on a Sunday, right, when you go to church and you listen to these songs, but make it a Monday thing, make it a Tuesday thing, make it a Wednesday thing and all that, right?
Are you talking just about the song, or are you talking about life?
For me personally, start with the song. Start with the song. Once you get into the moment, right, spiritually, even without the music, you will think that you're still worshipping. Yeah, it relates.
The song is the mechanism that allows you to get into that
You
mindset.
will get in the mood of worship once you start somewhere.
Yeah.
You have to have a foundation. You have to have a reason. My starting point was the songs.
It was the music.
Music.
I got you.
because-
Yep.
Yeah.
All right. Away with the noise of your songs is in the Bible, so that nobody can build on a life on the singing alone. Romans 12 is in the Bible, so that nobody can say they have nothing to offer. You have a body, you have a Wednesday, that was always meant to be the offering. If you are waiting until you feel qualified or musical or fluent, stop. The Bible says bow. That is the word. And that is all it ever meant. I still don't know about my own, right? I can tell someone that Scripture says this and Scripture says that, but I'm still not sure what God makes of mine. You know why? Because I know me, right? I know my flaws. I know my shortcomings. Am I living my life in a way that worships Him 24 hours a day? The honest answer is no. Is my worship accepted by Him? I don't know, right? All I know is that tomorrow I'm going to wake up and I'm going to put that sacrifice on the altar again. My living sacrifice. If this has shifted something in you, share it with one person who needs to hear it. That is how testimony travels. And if you are new here, start from episode 1. This story makes a whole lot more sense from the beginning. Don't forget, next Thursday, I am going to be arguing that faith does not pass down to your children automatically. Kavita is going to ask me the frightening version of that, and I genuinely do not think I will answer it well. That one is going to be very uncomfortable. Until then, I'm Kevin.
I'm Kavita.
And this is His faithfulness. He was faithful, He is faithful, He will be faithful.